Okay, I'm going to make a short video here about replacing a starter on a 2009 Kawasaki Brute Force 750 4x4i. Now, everything that I've seen on YouTube was Hondas and whatever, but there was really not a video for a Kawasaki Brute Force, so what you're going to get into is you're going to have to remove the air duct coming off of the breather where it comes off the motor. So you can kind of see, maybe you can see the air duct right back in here. So you have to take that off, and then it bolts onto the motor, and you're going to have to take the 4 bolts out of the connector where it connects onto the motor so that you can get the starter out. So just start out, you got a band clamp right there on that air duct. Take the band clamp off and pull your air duct off. Then you can get to the 4 bolts right where it bolts to the motor. You can't see them, but they're right back in here. Maybe I can move some stuff and you might be able to. Right there's the first one, right back there where my finger is. But anyway, there's 4 bolts on it. You have to take it off because the starter, the way the starter is put in there, to be able to take the bolts out of the starter, which hold it on, you can get them out without taking that connector off, but then you cannot get the starter to pull out because that connector's in the way. It's just an air duct connector, about 1.5 inch hole. All the bolts that go into that air duct connector are 10 millimeter, so you'll need a 10 millimeter socket and ratchet. And then the 2 bolts that hold the starter on here and here are 8 millimeter, so you'll need a 8 millimeter socket and ratchet. And what helped me a little bit was about a 2 or 3 inch extension. Made it easier to get some of the bolts out. And then of course right here is where your power hooks to the starter. So that's not a big deal. You can take that off. I believe that's a 10 millimeter also. But once you take these bolts out and you take the 4 bolts out of the connector where the air duct goes onto the motor, then you can put something between here and where it goes into the motor and just pry it a little bit and it'll pop loose. And then because that connector is gone, you've got room to pull it out like this and then get the starter out. And then whenever you go to put it back on, put the starter in first, keep your air duct and stuff disconnected, keep that connector disconnected, that way that you have a little bit of room. You get it up in there, and then go ahead and put your 2 bolts back in the starter to hold it on there. Put your power cable back on, and then you can put your connector and the 4 bolts, and then put your clamp back on in your hose. Now, the way to get to all of this is, mine was a little bit easier because I've got a 2 inch lift on it, but if you just jack it up from the middle, then you can slide right underneath the front end of the 4-wheeler, and then you're able to get up underneath there to everything that you need. A little work light helps tremendously, and that's about it. So you've got 4 bolts for your connector, you got 2 bolts holding the starter on, and you've got your 10 millimeter where your power cable hooks back to your starter. And I done it in about, it probably took me an hour because I didn't know where all the bolts and what all I needed to take off to get it out of there, so I piddled around a little bit with it. But not a super terrible job. It's just kind of tight and a little difficult to get to sometimes in some of the places. But anyway, that was it. And if I would have known that I had to take that connector and stuff off, that would have, sped up the process. So I figured I'd make a little video and show you, because I couldn't even find a video that showed where the starter was on a Kawasaki Brute Force. So anyway, you can see right here's the front of the machine, and if you go directly behind the front skid plate, I'll get under here and just show it to you. You go behind the front skid plate here, directly behind it, and boom, there's the starter. There's the 2 bolts that hold it on. There's the air duct where it connects to the connector. You got 4 bolts in the connector. And then there's where your power cable goes back on. So, and then over here, of course, is where it goes into the motor. And once you get everything out of the way and you're putting your new one back in, you can just kind of start that gear in there and just kind of wiggle it around a little bit, and it'll go in. It wasn't too hard to get in, but anyway, some of the bolts are a little difficult to get to. You can see right there's one of the bolts for that connector that the hose clamp goes on. There's one of the bottom ones. There's another one up top up there, and then there's 2 over on the other side. And because of your front axle, it makes it a little bit difficult, but not too horrible. But anyway, there's another one of the connector or the bolts that go in. So anyway, I hope this helps somebody. And if you have any other questions about it or whatever, just drop me a comment. All right, have a good day.